Okay, so for today's discussion, we have a special guest, Rox Samer, who is an assistant professor here at Clark University in the Visual and Performing Arts Department. I hope y'all enjoy.
All right. Hello, I'm Amanda.
Hi, I'm Jordana.
Hi, I'm Ashley.
I am Neil,
Hi, I'm Rox.
and we're talking about Far From Heaven.
Yes, Todd Haynes,
Yes,
2002 melodrama.
indeed.
It's the easy one. I mean, I can let you guys go first. I mean, the visual design in this film, all aspects, but I guess I'll glom onto one and say the costumes, love them, and I think there's actually a lot of meaning work going on there too. I honestly do not know what I would list. I'll come out now as not a huge melodrama fan, but unlike a number of my colleagues, but if I were to pick a melodrama to watch over and over, this would be it. So it's not my go-to genre or media feels, but as far as that goes, it's pretty great.
I feel like I'm kind of in the same boat as you, Rox. Well, to be honest, I also hadn't watched a lot of melodramas, but from everything we were going over in class and watching those videos, I found myself cringing literally the entire time. Or I would just, I feel like things would be a little awkward for me at least watching it. But this film in particular, I was obsessed. Like, I love the film, I love the characters. But the ending for me, I know that I'm just cutting to it, and I didn't hate it, but once the end popped up, I literally asked, I was like, that's it? Like, they're not even gonna hug or anything. Like, I was so upset that nothing actually happened. And I was like, this whole nick of time thing that we went over in class, I'm like, you got there, but you couldn't have even, said anything to him. Like, that was, I wouldn't say I would list it, but I definitely don't love it.
Yeah, that's fair. I would say the ending definitely for me would be the thing I liked the least because and it's like you said, she gets to the train station and I'm like, yes, it's the dramatic moment. She's gonna hop on with him or he's gonna get off and it's gonna be the big and then they just wave. And they don't even wave, they just put their hand up. And then
And I
that's
feel like she left her kids in the car for such a long time. Like when she was walking back, like you're not even the slightest bit concerned that your kids are there and someone might have taken them. Like there's this whole shot where she's walking on the platform and she's taking her sweet time. And the entire time I was like, where are your kids?
But that I don't we're starting to get into analysis and I'm like single parenthood, being a
That's
single
true.
mom, you cannot watch the kids and do all the things,
That is true.
you
yeah.
know?
They didn't seem to care too much about the kids that much throughout the movie, anyways. So,
They
you
were
know,
kind of just there. Like, I don't know. No one ever really seemed worried about anything they had to say or anything they were doing. They were just kind of an inconvenience for everyone.
A
I
part of
mean,
me.
they do. I feel like they do a little like emotional or affective like uplift so that like it's not just about Julianne Moore's character's reaction to her husband's sexuality. Like, when he starts to cry, they like that. I'm okay. If I had to list a moment, it would not be the ending for me, and we can talk about that more later. But it would be that moment where the like daughter like bursts into tears because like that is too far for
I
me.
I also think it was, in a way, kind of accurate in representation of what having kids is like. When you're at that age, you kind of have this privilege where you don't need to know what's going on in the real world, and you don't really need to know what's going on with real life problems that your parents are going through. And I feel like as you get older, you hear certain stories about families or friends where you're like, that's really effed up, But it's just because you're young enough to where you don't know about it. So I do think that was also a highlighted aspect of childhood through their characters.
Yeah, I think for sure. I mean, I think there's also stuff going on with gender there and the expectations for fatherhood and like emotional expression that like it makes sense that that would happen. I just find it like really like jarring. Like I'm not saying that like a kid shouldn't cry when she's or that it like totally it does make sense. The 1950s girl would cry when seeing her dad cry, but it's just I don't know, it hits you, and therefore like just feel it's like too big of feels for me, such those melodrama feels that I'm like,
As someone who's like only seen my dad cry once,
Me
I'd
too.
say I'd probably react in the same way as this little girl if I was younger and seeing my dad cry, because it's like it's the stereotype of men to not cry and not show emotion. So seeing your father, someone who always seems to have his life put together, burst into tears and looks like they're falling apart, it would kind of cause you to have that melodramatic feeling of like, oh my god, what's happening? My whole life's falling apart.
It's
yeah,
heartbreaking.
yeah, I'm not judgmental of the character, but like its inclusion in the film, or maybe it's the direction or acting or something about even the framing of that shot, right? Like that seems to go just a little over the top. Yeah. Neil, what about you?
On that scene,
Or no, loving and listening.
um, I loved very specifically Raymond's outfits were fantastic. That's the kind of stuff that I like to wear. I have a shirt very similar. He's got this kind of like felty um like flannel shirt that he wears throughout the movie, and I'm like, I have a shirt just like that and I love it. And I love everything he's wearing. I wish I could dress as well as that every day. Um I don't know why. I just loved his outfits in the whole movie. They just look great. All of the outfits were great, but his in particular.
Mid-century butch.
The amount of times Raymond just like alone made me cry during this movie. He was, I mean, he was my favorite character, but it was also like, for me, he was the only person in this entire movie that genuinely made me cry. Like nothing else, no one else made me cry, um, which was a bit surprising, but
I didn't cry. I expected to, but I just never did. And I'd say that also, riding on all of you guys, the clothing in this movie, amazing. I wish I had those dresses. I don't even like
the
dresses.
green one.
I don't, when the husband was like, "Oh my god, you look ravishing," I was like, "She does look ravishing." Oh my god, I wish I could dress like that. I don't like dresses at all. I hate dressing up like that. I prefer like a pants and a top, but I want those dresses. I need them in my life.
I also, my favorite thing about the clothes, the color in this movie, I felt like a crazy person, but it's so pretty. And then the colors of the lighting always aligns with the colors that everyone's wearing. And it felt very La La Land-esque. And it was beautiful. And I kept trying to decide like what the different colors meant. And I haven't come up with any decisions. But I found that all of the scenes where it was very like passionate, like all the scenes where the husband is like off at the bar or like with the other man in the office, it's always like this dark green moody light, and then all of the women are always like pinks and reds, and then all the scenes with the couple together I found tend to have very blue lighting. So I don't know what any of that means, but I got so distracted by it, and that was the only thing I could pay attention to the whole time.
Whenever Raymond was with the main woman, she like would always look around in the nature and it'd be bright. So bright. Like I know Connecticut. I grew up in New York. I know the area. It's not that bright. It's not that pretty. But I think it's kind of in the sense that I saw this one anime and it was like when you fall in love, your world turns into color. And that's kind of the vibe I was getting from their relationship. It's like they were falling in love for real, like they were actually feeling love in each other, and their whole entire world around them was turning to color.
I kind of struggled with thinking about that too because I felt as though like Kathy wasn't as attracted to Raymond sexually as much as she was to who he was as a person as a whole. Like she was in awe of his kindness, and she like mentioned like you're beautiful once, and so I genuinely didn't really know what to think about that. I felt like they were falling in love, but at the same time, like this sexual connection just wasn't there, and I'm assuming they did that intentionally. Um, but I think that's also why the end really bugged me because I was like, what are you like? Do you guys like each other? Do you guys love each other? Like, what's going on? What do you want? Like, ugh, it's so frustrating.
The "You're beautiful" scene is the only scene I hated in this entire movie.
For
Yeah.
real? That was the quote I picked.
Like it's not hyper. I understand where like the confusion as to whether they have sexual attraction to each other, and specifically whether Kathy has specific sexual attraction for Raymond, or whether she's just like lonely or wants a friend or wants someone she can be honest with. But I think, it's very subtle and it's not hypersexualized. But I think that also is speaking to sexuality in the 50s. And I have a quote related to that and the gay male representation, but I think it also speaks to this heterosexual love story that, like, it's for them both because of, her being married and because of the interracial relationship, but also just the 50s and any relationship that, like, she's not gonna like throw, like, even as she feels, and I think this has to do with the color too, what even as these characters might be feeling big and feeling bright, right, like they can't just throw themselves at each other. And so I think, what is their last name? Kathy, Mrs.
Whitaker.
Oh,
Mrs.
Whitaker.
Whitaker.
I'm thinking of the actress.
That scene in the bar when he calls her Mrs. Whitaker. This is my favorite moment in the movie. And she says, "Mrs. Whitaker is so formal. Can you?" And it's like the longest pause. And I love watching Julianne Moore's eyes in this scene, in the whole movie and in this scene, but specifically this shot. And you think she's gonna say, "Can you call me Kathy?" Like that's what she's about to say. But she's like, "Can you ask me to dance?" And it's like that's like that is the moment with the sexual tension, like, and that is for her throwing herself at him. Like it doesn't read that way to us, but I think the like low lighting and the uses of reds and greens throughout this movie and throughout Todd Haynes' films in general, like there's, I think we cut in that very like line delivery, we cut from over her shoulder to facing her. And it's interesting. I did notice in one version, she has like a green glow about her, but in the other direction, not. But I don't know, like that for me, like that's as close as you get to be like, to being like, take me to bed. I mean, like, but I get that it can't, like, but that's the most we get. So it's also kind of, an hour later and they're at the train station. Yeah, we expect them to like embrace, but no, it's hard.
I also
have more to say than I thought I did.
I also think like this attraction from Kathy to Raymond also has to do with unfamiliarity, like this whole segregation in their worlds. It's super unfamiliar for her to see someone with different values as opposed to those she surrounds herself around, which are obviously the characters that we saw, which only care about appearance, only care about status, only care about what others see, only care about the fact that they're this perfect put together family. So I think that also was super crucial in what this movie brought forth in terms of their relationship as well.
I mean, to this point of sexual conservatism, like her and her friends have to get drunk, like so drunk, day drunk, to talk about the frequency with which they have sex. No more than that.
That was like in the beginning of the movie too, right? Like, yeah.
I love watching Kathy's face in that scene because it's implied that she's probably not having sex very often with her husband. And so they're all going around like, I do it once a week. And I also thought it was so interesting too that they all consider it like a chore, that like they're like, well, my husband makes me do it this often. And I'm like, y'all, this shouldn't be a sad, depressing thing. And they're all like, well, thank God I'm not that woman that her husband makes her do it 3 times on the weekend. I'm like, I hope that all of their husbands aren't actually being like, here's our schedule and you have to do it at these times. Goodness gracious.
I mean, there's, yeah, I always have like two conflicting thoughts encountering that scene and that sort of way of talking about sex. On the one hand, I'm like, wow, it really sucks to be like a straight woman in the 50s and that this is how sex is done, um, on the man's terms, on his schedule, with no framework for her pleasure or her interests or her consent. At the same time, I wonder, like, then another part of me wonders, maybe it isn't miserable for all of them, but they all don't have the vocabulary or the norms or the, like it wouldn't be acceptable for one of them to go, I kind of like it sometimes, like that would be like, what? Like, also, so I'm also like, oh, like those conversations, if you imagine that all four of them are actually coming at it from slightly different perspectives and experiences, oh, like there's so much tension and so much not being said there.
Yeah, no one wants to be the odd woman out at brunch.
No. And I think we're very aware that Kathy is, because of the infrequency of sex and disinterest of her husband, but arguably one of the others is too, for a different reason. But we don't know.
I feel like just before that scene, you saw Kathy like trying to engage with her husband. She's like, "What about a little something something tonight?" And he's like, "No, I'm tired." But you can see that she wants to be intimate with her husband, like she likes doing that, and then everyone else around her just hates it and like thinks of it like a chore, that it's not something that they're all interested in, and she can't speak out about her feelings. And I feel like it's something that relates to society today, where people, like women especially, can't really speak up to their partners, saying like, "Hey, what if we tried this or that?" And it's really just like by the book, missionary only.
And then it's so sad that at the end, she finally goes to her friend and tells her friend what's been going on with her husband and why she's been going through this. And she's like, "You see now why I couldn't tell you. Like, I would have been shamed and I would have been judged," which, like, first of all, that's wrong. But even beyond that, she's like, "I'm going to you now and I'm trusting you." And her friend still ends up mad at her and still ends up rejecting her and is like, "Well, I defended you, but they were actually right about you." And it's like, it's so frustrating. She deserves friends that will actually support her and listen to what she's going through. Because then otherwise they're all just gonna sit there and be miserable at brunch and no one's gonna just admit that they're all going through the same things.
You can so tell that they were the mean girls in high school. Like the woman that sees Raymond and Kathy getting out of the same car, like we all know that person. We all knew someone in high school, and as soon as I watched that, I was like, I know someone exactly like that. So yeah, I agree. She definitely needs better friends.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm so nosy.
Yeah, Patricia Clarkson character, who's the best friend, who claims to be understanding or there for her earlier and then in fact isn't, is such a complicated character for me. It's one thing I really appreciate about Todd Haynes' direction of this film, is that, I mean, what's interesting to me is this film is taking on so much. Like, it's taking on feminism, it's taking on queerness, it's taking on like racism and anti-racism. And it's showing that, I think, especially from a 2020 perspective, we think of these things all lining up neatly. Like, so if you're a feminist, you're also anti-racist. You're also, like, if not queer, then like, a queer ally. But in fact, in the present, but also in different historical moments, those things are a little bit off sometimes. So that Patricia Clarkson's character, when she realizes that her friend might be being hit by her husband, is like, "Call me day or night." And like, that is a similar 1950, like, it doesn't sound like much, but that is a acknowledgement of a circumstance that's big and is open and generous and kind. But then when she does actually come to her and does actually reach out, like, happy to help in any way, until this slight possibility of even attraction to a Black man, and like in kinship and friendship. Like, it doesn't even, I don't even think for her it's that she now definitely assumes they had sex or something. It's even that it came vaguely close to that possibility. And it's like, it's ever the more heartbreaking for as much, because if we could just be like, this lady is like wrong on all accounts, it would be really easy to be like canceled next, you know. But that she has been kind and has seen Kathy in a way that, you know, it makes it hurt and suck ever the more for me.
And she didn't really seem like, as far as the talking went and her interaction with Raymond, like she seemed understanding of that. But the minute that Kathy was like, I think of him, it was almost as though Eleanor had this revelation where she was like, oh my gosh, like you're literally putting mental energy into this person. And she doesn't see Raymond as someone who's worth even thinking about. So I do think it's this idea where like Eleanor saw that moment as when she realized it was actually affecting Kathy, as opposed to affecting other people that were talking about their relationship.
And it's also like okay to the extent that it can be contained by humor as a joke. Like the ongoing joke about Kathy being more open-minded than her friends, that Eleanor is always like referencing and laughing at. Like it's okay in that realm. Like, but once it crosses a line into like seriousness, and yeah, it's not okay anymore. To tie this back to the costume, since we're talking about Eleanor, I'm totally confused or intrigued by the costuming choices contrasting Eleanor and Kathy, because you would think that if Kathy is the more progressive or liberal, open-minded woman, that she would dress more modern. And this is like on the verge of the 60s. This is like late 50s representation. And the more conservative and traditional woman would have the, you know, the old-fashioned dresses, but it's switched. And so Patricia Clarkson is always showing up looking like sexy in a much more chic, modern, fitted sort of way, whereas Julianne Moore's character is showing up more conventional in like presentation of femininity. And I think that adds to this like ambiguity or messiness, that another director would have gone, you know, would have lined them up so neatly, but not.
I feel like Julianne Moore dresses the way that she does in the film based on the way society views her family as the American family, like the perfect Americans and everything. So she dresses as you would see in the newspapers or on like postcards from the 50s and 60s. She dresses in the way that you would expect someone from that time to.
I think we even see that Magnatech ad that she's in, and she looks exactly like usually, like they're right together in the same shot.
Putting her arm up in the exact same position and everything.
I kind of like
she
that
had
they did that at that moment. Oh, go ahead.
She had it like framed in her house. And I'm like, okay, I guess.
I would
I kind
frame
of
a
liked
picture of myself like that too.
I kind of liked how they did those costume contrasts though, because I feel like it only added to the facade that the Whitaker family had. And like Frank, oh my God, I mean, just like, I feel like it also added into like the toxicity into their marriage, like how controlling Frank was, and anything that Kathy did and the way that she talked to Frank, it was like she was there to serve him. Like even after she had found out about his sexuality, and she was like, oh, like we can work with it, after that, and like even when they were finding a place to go for their celebration of their anniversary at Christmas, like you can just so tell that she's like continuously playing into this character where she's like meant to be there for Frank no matter what, even if she has kids, even if she's a mother, even if she's a friend. So I think that as we talk about it more, I'm realizing that costume played a bigger role into that than I realized.
I also thought it was so fitting that she finds out about Frank because she's bringing him the little Tupperware container of food. Because I'm just like, what is more like classic American housewife than like packing up the little to go box of the meal that she's gonna like bring to her husband at work while he stays late? And then to have that, and then all of a sudden she walks in and her husband's like shirtless, making out with another man. And it's like, oh my God, suddenly this movie isn't going where we thought it was going. And so I don't know. And I just, it kind of ties in all of that. But I was like, in that moment, I was like, oh, the poor thing. She's doing all the things she's expected to do. And it's just, it'll never be enough.
Her reaction was also really put together. Like I was from all the, like I said, like the clips that we saw in class, like I was expecting for her to like freak out in the elevator and like scream and like out of just anger.
Throw that dish.
Yeah, like something, but she just like walked away. Like she ran down the elevator and I was just like, where's the drama? Like,
I feel like
but
this movie in a way goes against like the stereotypical melodramatic woman in the sense that it's really Frank that's overreacting and going over top of his like reactions to everything that Kathy's doing, and she'll be like, "No, you're perfect," and he'll be like, "No," and smacking her across the face for no reason, and it's just showing the opposite of what you would expect. Like in class, he was talking about how it's rarely the man that's the problem, but this entire movie, the man was the problem.
which
Yeah.
is super ironic considering that like all of these themes of melodrama all point to the fact that it's always the woman. Like even the mother problems aspect, like every problem that she had was brought on by Frank, which ultimately like leads her to fill in the other themes in the movie, right? Like the broken family, the impossible love, all of these social and community pressures. And I also think this terminal illness aspect, I think, well, I'm assuming that Todd Haynes took on this aspect of melodrama through Frank's sexuality and where that was his like terminal illness. Um, so I thought that the way that he used Frank in every aspect of the themes of melodrama was really, really interesting.
Yeah, I have a couple of things to say. One, I think again we see like we don't see Julianne Moore like overact like that expressivity. We keep noting how so much is muted in what is said and how it's said throughout this film, but we see it again in like the formal elements. So in that sort of movement out of the office back down through the elevator and through the lobby, we get these like very slight canted angles where the that is speaking to her internal state, and cueing us into like the big feels that are happening but aren't being expressed verbally. And then there's like a lot going on with gender and sexuality here. I think this is like a very gay male specific story and set of contrasts. And I think both what we're noting about, you know, elements of patriarchal privilege, male privilege, and domestic violence sort of fitting into a very clean picture again is like of violence and oppression is troubled by the fact that he's gay and that this behavior and this dynamic is askew as a result. Like this isn't a straight husband with like he is a man of the 50s and like they are playing their role, the roles given to them and are totally fitting this patriarchal norm. At the same time, that norm is also suffocating for him like it is for her, but differently. And at the same time, it's also, he has a certain privilege to explore nonetheless. What is difficult here for him. So I kept thinking watching this, how different a story this would be if she were the gay one, right? Or like, and how different like lesbian life in the 50s was than like gay male life. And that he does leave the house and go to work and could like make the excuse of like working late or going out for drinks with colleagues afterwards and therefore cruise men and meet men.
If you're looking for a movie like that, Todd Haynes does have Carol.
Yeah, and it's different. I mean, I haven't watched Carol in forever, but I love Carol.
I watched it right after I finished. I was like, time to get another one in.
But the stakes are so different. The means of, Carol's interesting because if Carol is the analogous character, we enter the story at a very different point, which is interesting there. Sorry, we're getting off topic, but we do have the 50s
all the time. Don't worry.
We do get Todd Haynes doing like 1950s melodrama housewife lesbian, but we don't enter at the same in an analogous point as Frank's journey.
If it has entered in the point where like it was just Carol and Abby, then it would be a completely different story.
Oh my God, I would so be there for that story. Sarah Paulson, we need that moment.
Oh, I love her.
We don't get it, which is okay because that's not the novel that it's based on. But yeah, it's just interesting. But like even just thinking about it in the case of Far From Heaven, what if Julianne Moore was not only like a 1950s like rich white lady who had all these expectations to stay home and take care of her kids and never talk about her thoughts and feelings, but also she was a lesbian. Like,
I feel like that would have been a better role for Viola Davis in this one. Like, because I expected to see more of Viola, and I didn't get what I wanted.
no.
Well, I also like growing up. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just gonna say that would have been so good if the husband had been with his boyfriend and then she had been with Viola Davis. Like, beautiful. That would have been beautiful.
Well, it's also like Rox, going off of what you were saying and all this male privilege. When Frank came home early and had heard about the rumors of Kathy and Raymond getting out of the car, and he was like, I worked for 8 years for this family and you're gonna throw it all away, blah blah. Like if the roles were switched, and if she was the one that had been committing adultery, I feel like it could have been the same situation where he was like, you ruined everything, like I've done this and that for this family. And even when even when it's revealed that he's gay, like she immediately is like, we can help you, like we can fix you, you know. And I feel like a lot of that was because he had this figure where he was like working for his family and he was that the main breadwinner and the one who was supposed to keep the stability in the family. So it definitely would have been really interesting seeing that dynamic if the movie were flipped.
Yeah, I mean, it also speaks to the differences between racism and homophobia and like 1950s thoughts on these matters, such that, like, I mean, also homosexuality was thought to be an illness that could possibly be cured. Whereas, you know, there's no cure to to like open. I don't know, like what's the right word? I don't want to call her an anti-racist. She doesn't earn that title, but to more liberal, or more liberal. There's no cure for white lady liberalism. Taken out of context, that could be a whole different thing. But but also that there is the sense that like her dalliances or possible dalliances would ruin their family in a ways that his don't. I mean, they do, but they don't. Like it's still, it just comes with different repercussions. And I don't know if I want to put it as like more taboo, because like it's not that simple as like, some sort of seesaw, but definitely her being interested in someone else and interested. It's both the someone else period and a Black man that really would not jive with 1950s domestic life and whiteness at that time. Like, no. But yeah.
That kind of
Great. I should do this every night. I love talking to students who aren't my own too.
That kind of brings me to a question that was in a review that I thought was really amazing. So the review says this film speaks to the issues of the 50s and 60s that we are experiencing daily in the 21st century. You will be forced to ask, has anything really changed, especially in the US? Watch the movie, then answer the question for yourself. And if you don't like the answer, what can you change about it? And that just brings up so much emotions, because like growing up as a person of color in America and being able to like see Raymond's point of view, like when he says, I've learned my lesson about mixing in other worlds, and that he's seen sparks fly and all kinds and everything like that. Growing up in America as a person of color, you kind of see that, oh, what it's like to be not a person of color in all the representation that's on TV. But then when you're at home and you're trying to live the same life, people are have their bags, like they're moving their bags away from you as you're walking down the street. Oh, they're pointing, staring, and everything. It's like you grow up just knowing what it's like for everyone else to have that happy life, and then still not being able to experience it yourself.
Definitely.
I think, oh, go ahead, Amanda.
I was just gonna say, if we wanted to go into quotes, we could do that now. But it's up to whatever.
I'm fine with that. I was just gonna say that, like, I think Jordana, your quote, I would definitely agree. But I think in some ways, obviously it's better, but in some ways it's also worse because I don't know, you still see people in our generation that have this ideology that is similar to those that we're discussing right now. And like they do see life as like that way with such segregation. So I do think like, yes, I agree, but it's also super sad to think about considering that it's our generation and those below us that are supposed to be those who change that and change those societal norms and values. So in that sense, like I do think it can be worse because younger people are taking on this idea that that's the way the world works.
Okay, mine's from the New York Times, and this kind of ties into what we were talking about earlier. So it says, all of the wild, unruly feeling that the characters must repress pops to life around them in every detail of Mark Friedberg's production design, Edward Lackman's painterly cinematography, Sandy Powell's delectable costumes, and above all, the great Elmer Bernstein's sobbing, swooping score. And I feel like because, like we said, there isn't a lot of that overdone acting. The one like close-up shot that I noted was with Kathy when Frank is her husband, right? Yeah. When he's like sobbing on the couch, he's talking about how he's like, I just can't do it. But there's this close-up shot of her face, and it's just blank. There's just not like it doesn't really. It's not that tear jerker. We're watching her cry, and like he's having all this emotion. We could have a close up on him, but they don't give us that. The true melodrama is coming from all of these other things. It's coming from the costumes. It's coming from the lighting. It's coming from all of the cinematography and all of that. So I thought that was pretty cool.
I love painterly cinematography. Like I love how that's put, and I think that's so perfect in describing how this movie was.
Should I go next?
Go for it?
Okay. So there was a review on IMDb, and I like halfway agree with this, and halfway don't. I'm not gonna read the whole thing, but basically they said, let me read what the title of it was.
I hope you didn't take the review I got.
It actually might be because it was one of the first ones I saw, and I didn't want to take it because it was like the first one, but I was like, it's the most interesting one. It said breaking free.
Oh no.
No, okay. So while this film is certainly about race and sexual preference, I think its observations are actually much more universal. What it is about, and so many of the movies it references are also about, is how social structures work hard to prevent you from stepping outside your little world. And that's basic. And I kind of understand that, and I kind of get that. Like, it does feel a little less like they don't exactly explore um the issues with like homophobia super deeply, and they don't explore the issues with racism super deeply, where you can say like that it's about one thing. Like they do, like it's obviously about those things, but I kind of get where this reviewer is coming from in saying that it's more about kind of breaking free in general, and that how society blocks people no matter what like situation you're in. um Society will almost always, or societal constructions will always work against you in being able to kind of break free from a certain expectation, and I think that's true.
Yeah, people suck.
People do suck.
I think this movie manages to be about gender, race, class, and sexuality. I always still bristle at the word universal because I think we live in a world where we can't imagine universality not on white masculine terms and it's straight terms, like, so for me, it's I don't know. I would just want to do the busy work of listing it all. Like, this film is about anti-Black racism. This film is about feminism. This film is about homophobia and specifically gay male homosexuality mid-century. Like, it's not as quotable.
Definitely. I don't think it's nearly as fully universal as this person puts it, but that's definitely true.
Yeah.
It's interesting though, hearing someone else's take on it like that, in that manner, for sure. I like that review a lot, actually.
And I'll just say my straight man, white dad loves this movie, so maybe it is. I think it does speak to a certain liberalism, broadly speaking.
I think even as like, I think some of the issues in it can also speak to people who are not suffering those exact same issues, like where Dennis Quaid, whatever his character's name, Frank, is having, he can't express himself in any sort of way because of like the expectation of men to suppress themselves, and that can be kind of relatable from people who aren't even homosexual in any way. It's you can still relate to that problem. So I think it somewhat makes it a little bit more universal, even though. But
I have a quote speaking to exactly this, and it is from a review/interview with Dennis Quaid, published in The Advocate, which is a gay publication, but with the hilarious title of "A Man's Man." Sexy leading man Dennis Quaid talks about surviving drama club, what went wrong with Meg, and playing a married gay man in Todd Haynes' acclaimed new film, Far From Heaven. And Dennis Quaid speaks to how he approached this character as a straight male actor, who's familiar through friends and acquaintances with, I have friends who are gay, and including a former girlfriend whose father, who went through this from like the daughter's perspective, whose father came out late in life. But he also then does this sort of universalizing move of saying, in addition to understanding where his character is coming from as a gay man mid-century, also sort of related it to my own life, trying to finally surrendering to who you are, and sort of speaking to understanding this sort of existential struggle that many people experience as to how to live authentically and honestly with who one is, and being comfortable in being oneself. Certainly people involved in this production were thinking about it from that perspective too.
I found that she wasn't really reacting too much to anything that her husband said. Like, she kept a lot of her emotions inside, but like her whole husband's on the couch like crying in front of her, and she's like, "Ooh, well, I don't know how to react to this one." And he's like, "I've fallen in love with someone else," and she's like, "Oh, okay."
You want a divorce then?
She just brought it up. She's like, "So divorce, I guess." Not that I'm upset with you falling in love with someone else and saying that you were never in love with me, but so I guess we're done.
Which was surprising because like it's this whole idea that you're supposed to focus on the look of your family, and she was the one that was immediately like, so we should get a divorce then, as opposed to him being like, I think that we should separate, where throughout the entire movie she was always trying to accommodate him and trying to make him feel comfortable and make things as easy as possible on his end. So
but I think she was in the mentality that if she's no longer with him, then she could fall in love with Raymond.
That's true.
I think it's also the very like mom mentality. It's like, get your coat, take a bath, let's get a divorce. like it's just like there's a to-do list. Let's get it done. I don't, we talk about the ending? We like did bring it up at the beginning. To me, it's a, when it comes to her and him, it's like a sad ending, or, I think there's a way that the story is for the most part from her perspective, but I think it's like small, it might feel like breadcrumbs from 2020 perspective, but that our gay character doesn't commit suicide is a big deal. That our gay character meets someone who wants to be with him. That everyone, despite how this must radically shift their lives, it isn't in fact like depicted, like it might be perceived from her friends and their like neighbors and everyone as, and their his coworkers, right, as tragedy, but I don't think it's like really depicted as tragedy, right? And so it's like relatively like both happy ending but also realistically happy ending.
I
You
think
know, it's
that's why this movie is so popular, and
Mm.
it's because it's like one of those like, okay, so this could theoretically happen without you being sad about it. A lot of gay representation in media always ends in either being overly sexualized or someone's dying. It's never like, okay, so things were bad, but they got better in the end.
Yeah, or it was like it was hard, but also not devastating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I thought was kind of interesting was I felt like what bothered me about the ending wasn't necessarily how, like, the way things went, but that I felt like I wanted just a little bit more because I'm so curious what Kathy is going to do now. Because she doesn't have, at like, she said she has no savings. It's her and these two kids. And she's just, I'm like, what's going to happen to her? And then we don't really know what's going to happen to her husband. He's in this hotel, but I'd love to know where he goes next. We have no idea what's going to happen with Raymond. He's on the train, he's gone. They're just like, well, they're all off, and we just have to accept that. And that was what was frustrating for me.
And she has no friends. Like, she lost all her friends. Like, you guys, I literally sat for like an hour yesterday. And I really couldn't tell why I liked the movie that much. I loved the movie. And I also couldn't really tell why I couldn't bring myself to say I hated the ending. I just didn't like it. But all of that, like all of those questions, make me so upset. Only because I was really hoping, like, not even a high five, like something, anything I would have taken, but just like a little, I just
I
this
liked
was
the ending.
really. I feel like one of you guys was gonna say that. I was just so. It's fine though because not my movie, so.
I think it's good for what the movie was. You know, it's like you don't need to see a big love ending where Raymond and Kathy are happy together. You don't need that. It's not what would happen in that time in reality. What how the movie ended is what you would expect to happen in the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
Not them actually being able to kiss and be happy at that train station, or her getting on that train and leaving her kids at the train station. Like that wouldn't be something that you would actually see. So I'd like a realistic ending.
Yeah, and I think it's also it's ambiguous and it holds open possibility. So I don't think you need to take it as saying that they definitely never get together, but they're not getting together right now in this moment, in this way, and in this public space, right? You think about them actually kissing on the train station, if you cut there, like there's a certain violence to that because what happens after they make out on a train station platform, right? Like that's not ending well. But
We already
like
saw the
maybe,
violence when all he did was touch her arm. That one guy across the street was
Everyone
like,
was
"Hold up,
like,
let her go."
yeah, he walks through there. It starts with him walking through her yard and they're like, let's call the police, right? So I don't know, like I think you can also, with these more ambiguous endings, if you want your happy ending, you get to imagine it for yourself. Like maybe they start writing letters. And like if they are gonna make it work, it's gonna take so much work, right? Like on her part, and it's gonna take so much in terms of so much enduring, ongoing conflict with society.
It's gonna take so much like heartache and like acceptance on Raymond's part for knowing that the reason his daughter was being targeted was because of Kathy, and knowing that it's also part of him, and he's not going to want to put his daughter in that position. He wants the best life for his daughter, and he knows that's leaving this area.
Yeah, it would have been really interesting seeing this movie within the context of them not having kids or just one of them having kids. Like even this, like Raymond, for example, like the fact that his wife passed away and that he's like very much okay with the fact that it's just him and his daughter now. I think he also finds peace in that he's doing what's right for her, so that the mother um, rests well as well. So it'd be super interesting seeing what the movie would be like without kids.
Yeah, I do think as far as her future goes, we get one clue, which is on the note of fashion, on costuming, which is that the big skirts are gone and the very practical business wear is in. So I think we're supposed to take it that she is at least looking for employment if it hasn't found it, but we're not told a lot there. And one thing I'm really anxious about then is if Viola Davis's character is going to have a job anytime soon without like a business exec salary coming in. Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah,
sure if
she-
Viola Davis would be able to like have a job with Kathy struggling with no savings, not being able to pay her the same rate at least, and it's going to be a struggle because we never get to see Viola Davis's life. You know, we never get to see if she has a family, kids of her own. All we hear is her saying that one line like, "Oh, I wanted to tell you, but didn't want to mess anything up."
And she's involved in a number of choruses.
Yes.
There's some
She
singing.
goes to church. That's all we know. The stereotypical Black woman that goes to church.
There is one shot that stands out to me, and it's certainly nothing along the lines of character development or plot, but it stood out to me this time when Kathy gets in Raymond's truck at home. So before anyone sees them arrive elsewhere, it's with Viola Davis's character that we see her get in the truck, and we have a shot of her inside and this like, foreboding, like, oh no, anxious look, which, I think in the course of the film we can sort of take to mean she knows very well what may come.
I took that as maybe this movie's gonna take another turn and be like, oh, Viola Davis is in love with Raymond, and then we're gonna have this giant like love triangle.
I totally
that
thought
was
it was
amazing.
jealousy.
Oh, you thought it was jealous?
I totally, at the very beginning, in that one shot, I was like, oh, she's just like, she had her eye on him. And then I quickly was like, oh no, she's just worried about them. But in the very beginning, when I saw that shot, that was where I thought it was going.
Yeah,
I think I'm just oblivious. I didn't get that at all.
I think she's located at a really interesting sort of pivot point where she like is both a member of like Raymond's, community and lives in his neighborhood where we later realize when we first see them they have that moment together, but we don't know if it's just like, Black acknowledgement or if they do. That's how I always take it. I don't actually presume they know each other because like there's many Black people, even in Connecticut. But later on, the fact that she knew that it was Sarah who was assaulted leads me to like my train of thought leads me to think, oh, they maybe do live in the same neighborhood and maybe are acquaintances even prior to this whole narrative starting. But like her character serves as this pivot bit between the two, that she's also like in a way with Julianne Moore. This is who she spends her every day with. This is who her employer is. And she's in that moment looking out the window, seeing it like from a very sort of omniscient perspective of knowing everything, like being able to tell how this will work out better than anyone else.
Yes. Are we ready?
All right, 3, 2, 1.
I'm so bright. I love that. 1 time a week. Oh.
Wait, Neil, did you say margarine?
Yeah.